A struggling single mother and her unreliable sister start a crime scene cleanup service. However, constantly dealing with clients who've suffered a recent tragedy or loss prompts the siblings to acknowledge their shared deep-seated trauma. One morning, a man in a suit sits inside his car and opens the glove compartment. Then, he grabs a shotgun shell from a box and places it in his shirt pocket. Minutes later, the man calmly enters a firearms store and tells the employee that he'd like a 20 gauge. Suddenly, the customer loads the shell into the weapon and points it at himself, ending his life. Meanwhile, Rose, a housekeeper, wistfully watches her clients as they enjoy the pool party in the backyard. Concurrently, the woman's father, Joe, knocks on a bedroom door to try to wake her sister Norah because she's late for work. However, the woman groggily tells her father that she's going back to sleep, implying that she doesn't care about her job at the restaurant. Later that day, Rose continues tirelessly cleaning the client's lavish home. Meanwhile, Norah loses her job at the restaurant after the owner has had enough of her terrible work ethic and behavior. In the firearms store, Officer Mack interviews the employees about what happened. So the man explains that the guy just walked into the establishment with his own ammo and harmed himself. The shop owner looks around and annoyedly points out that he'll have to hire a professional cleanup crew since the man's blood and viscera are splattered everywhere. That evening, Rose steps out of the shower and reads aloud phrases of affirmation that she's written down on a post-it note on the mirror. Soon, Norah arrives at the house to babysit her nephew Oscar while her sister goes to class. Later that night, Mac and Rose put on their clothes after doing the deed in a motel room, revealing that the woman lied about going to class and has been secretly seeing the cop. Then, he mentions the crime scene at the firearms store and says that professional cleaning services charge clients thousands of dollars. When the woman asks if the dead body is still there when the cleanup crew arrives, the man clarifies that they only have to deal with the bodily fluids left behind. Mac adds that Rose should consider the line of work since she can use her experience as a housekeeper for a more lucrative purpose. Offended, she states that cleaning after people isn't the only thing she can do. So the apologetic cop holds her close and assures her that she's capable of much more. Later, Norah hears her sister entering the house, so she quickly hides her cigarette behind the window blinds. The housekeeper insists on paying her sibling $10 for babysitting. But when Norah declines, Rose reveals that she knows she lost her job at the restaurant and needs the money. Then, the older sister points out the woman's immaturity and refusal to take responsibility in her life. But the latter counters that Rose likes it when she messes up because it makes her feel better about herself. The next day, the housekeeper realizes that she and her new client Paula went to high school together. The pregnant lady shares that she was always jealous of Rose because she was the head cheerleader who dated Mac the quarterback. When Paula asks if she tied the knot with her high school sweetheart, the housekeeper says that he married Heather, revealing that she and the cop are having an affair. Then, the pregnant woman asks for the housekeeper's contact information, since she plans on inviting her to her baby shower in a few weeks. The client wonders what else she has going on in her life, so Rose says she's getting her real estate license, and being a housekeeper is a temporary gig until she can focus on real estate full-time. Overwhelmed by the realization of how drastically different her life is to people from high school, her eyes well up with tears as she sits inside her car. Suddenly, she receives a call from the school asking her to drop by for an urgent meeting regarding Oscar's disruptive behavior. In the office, the counselor explains that aside from the 2 incidents earlier this year, the boy has now begun licking objects and surfaces in the classroom. The man suggests medication and transferring the child to a private school where he can receive more specialized attention. Because she can't afford a private school education for Oscar on a housekeeper's salary, the desperate Rose calls Mac and asks him for help using his connections to set up the crime scene cleanup service business. That evening, the woman recruits her sister as a partner in the fledgling business, and even though Norah has her doubts, she eventually agrees since she's currently unemployed anyway. The next day, Rose drops Oscar off at her father's house, while she and her sibling head out to the first crime scene Mac assigned them to. Outside the apartment building, the landlord explains that it was a domestic disturbance where a lady shot off her husband's finger. When he asks the women how long they've been in their line of work, Rose lies and says a while, eliciting a chuckle from her sister. Eventually, the inexperienced pair cautiously enter the apartment and begin cleaning up the blood splattered all over the bathroom walls. Since they only brought basic cleaning supplies, the sisters immediately realized that they'd need specific products and equipment moving forward. Meanwhile, Joe takes Oscar to a candy store where he tries to convince the owner to buy his confection called Fancy Corn. Hoping to help his grandfather, the child approaches a girl and mentions how fancy corn gives a person bionic strength. The girl tells her mother that she wants the candy, and the woman asks the shop owner about fancy corn, securing a sale for Joe. Later, the elated grandfather commends Oscar for his intelligence and thanks him for helping him seal the deal with the candy store owner. However, the child insists he isn't smart because all his teachers want him to go to a special school for slower students. So, Joe assures his grandson that he's very intelligent and that his teachers merely failed to recognize his gifts. That afternoon, the landlord hands Rose the $500 check, and she happily tells the man to call them anytime he requires their services again. That night, the housekeeper and the cop meet up at the motel for their weekly tryst. Because the man feels like he's been neglecting her lately, he wants to make it up to her by paying for her real estate classes. As the pair lays on the bed, Rose suddenly asks Mac why he chose Heather over her, much to his surprise. Annoyed, the cop threatens to leave if she continues pushing the topic, so the woman kisses him on the lips and implies that she's dropping the subject. The next day, the sisters arrive at a trailer home, which they've been tasked to clear out and clean. As they carry the filthy mattress toward the nearest dumpster, Rose lets go of her end, causing Norah to fall face first into the questionable stain. The irate woman curses her sister and refuses to help carry the mattress the rest of the way, and the giggling housekeeper tells her that she's overreacting because the filth will just wash off. Concurrently, Joe sees Oscar using a pair of binoculars and asks where he got them. So, the boy explains that he found it in a closet in his grandfather's house. After taking a closer look, the man realizes that the binoculars belong to his late wife, so he takes them back and promises to get his grandson a new pair for his birthday. Later, Norah wonders if Rose also feels like it's disrespectful that they're just stuffing the deceased woman's belongings into trash bags, like they're erasing her existence. Then, inside a bag, she finds a driver's license and the picture of who she believes is the dead woman's daughter. Norah adds that if they were in the daughter's position, they'd want to know what happened to their mother. However, Rose counters that this situation would have never happened to their family because their mother wouldn't let their house devolve into squalor. That evening, Norah looks at the pictures and learns that the deceased woman's daughter's name is Lynn Wiseman. The next day, at the janitorial supply store, the siblings ask the one-armed owner Winston for advice, and he points out the basic products and equipment they'll need. Moments later, the sisters overhear Carl, who has his own crime scene cleanup service, telling the store owner that he's heard about a couple of amateurs poaching jobs from other established businesses. After the male customer leaves, Winston realizes that the women might be the amateurs mentioned earlier, so he lends them binders containing the rules and regulations of crime scene and biohazard cleanup. In the car, Rose tells her sister that she needs her to babysit Oscar tonight because she has class. However, Norah knows she's meeting up with Mac, so she callously states that the cop's wife is pregnant again, and that it's time the housekeeper accepts that he'll never leave his family for her. Later, Norah tracks down Lynn's address, and she follows the woman as she walks to work. In the elevator, the cautious Lynn presses a button to stop the carriage and asks Norah why she's following her. So, the guilty woman lies and swears that she wasn't tailing the lady, and that it's just a coincidence that they entered the same building. Relieved, Lynn notices the veins on Norah's arm and says she should consider donating to their blood bank. That night, the distraught housekeeper lies on the motel bed, wondering why Mac didn't show up. Meanwhile, Norah grabs an old metal lunchbox from under her bed and sadly stares at the picture of her late mother next to her and her sister when they were children. Days later, Rose stops by the janitorial supply store and shows Winston the new business cards for Sunshine Cleaning, and he says he likes her positive spin to the name, considering how grim their line of work is. The man suggests she market their service to funeral homes, property managers, and insurance companies because they're the ones who can offer a lot of work. When Winston learns that they don't have their bloodborne pathogen certification yet, he offers to sign them up for the next seminar. Soon, the family purchases a used van they can use to transport contaminated materials to the incinerator. Over the next few weeks, the sisters' business begins to grow, and they learn more and more about the proper techniques of crime scene cleanup. Slowly but surely, the pair purchases special equipment that'll make it easier for them to do their job. One evening, while sifting through the mail, Rose sees a letter from Paula inviting her to the baby shower. The next day, at a gas station, Mac's pregnant wife Heather confronts the housekeeper and implies that she knows about the affair. Before walking away, the scorned woman pointedly tells Rose that even though she was the popular girl in high school, her life has amounted to nothing since. Concurrently, Joe takes his grandson along as he purchases discounted frozen shrimp from a shady supplier. That afternoon, the housekeeper learns that her father promised Oscar an expensive pair of binoculars for his birthday. Even though she tries to explain that he shouldn't believe his grandfather's outlandish promises, the boy trusts that he'll come through for him on his birthday. One day, Norah stops by the blood bank to donate, even though she's scared of needles. Then, she invites Lynn to a party her friend is throwing that evening, and the latter surprisingly accepts. During the party, the women share a meaningful conversation about their differing views regarding the use of illicit substances. When Lynn asks if Randy's her boyfriend, Norah gives a vague answer after seeing the man flirting with two people. Then, Lynn leans in to take a bite out of the woman's candy necklace, causing the latter to battle conflicting emotions since she's starting to care for her new friend. Yet she hasn't disclosed the real reason why she wanted to meet her. Later that night, while the disinterested Norah does the deed with Randy on the couch, she watches a news report on TV about an out-of-control driver crashing into an auto shop, resulting in one casualty. Soon, the siblings arrive at the scene where Rose and Mac exchange wary looks but don't speak to each other. Then, the woman assures another police officer that their cleaning service is equipped to deal with the grisly aftermath. Their next client, Mrs. Davis, says that she called them to clean the den where her late husband harmed himself. Seeing how distraught the widow is, Rose offers to sit next to her on the porch for a little while, which the client greatly appreciates. Meanwhile, Norah enters the den and sees the blood-soaked chair in the corner of the room. Then, the striking scene forces the woman to remember the fateful day many years ago when she and her sister were playing with the sprinklers in the yard. That afternoon, Joe tries to sell his shrimp to a Mexican restaurant, but the owner declines his offer. That night, Norah invites Lynn on a walk underneath the railroad tracks, and she shares that the only dead body she's ever seen was her mother's. Then, she confides that she doesn't remember much about her mother, because she ended her own life when she was just a child. Just before the train passes by above them, Norah scales the trestles until she's only a few feet underneath the platform. As the heavy cars glide up above, she screams at the top of her lungs, and the sparks from the tracks flicker around her. Years ago, the sisters' fun frolicking in the yard was cut short when they found their mother's lifeless body in the tub, a traumatizing image that went on to haunt them both for the rest of their lives. Concurrently, the tearful Rose ends her relationship with Mac because she's accepted that he'll never leave his wife for her. On the day of the baby shower, the woman answers a call from an insurance company wanting them to fill in for a cleanup job because their regular crew isn't available. Because she's already RSVP'd to the event, she asks her sister to start the job by herself until she can catch up later. Norah tells Rose to blow off the baby shower, especially since working with an insurance company will lead to plenty of opportunities for them in the future. But the latter says she has to prioritize the time with her high school friends. The woman tries to drop off Oscar at her father's house, but the old man is busy dumping the unsold shrimp from the tub and into trash bags. With no other choice, Rose asks Winston to look after her son for a few hours, and he says yes. Later, Norah arrives at the house, and she immediately lights the candles on top of the dresser to try and combat the nasty stench in the space. At the baby shower, the woman tells the other guests all about her new business venture. When they ask if she likes her job, Rose's eyes light up as she explains how fulfilling it is to help those who've experienced profound loss. Meanwhile, a kitten scurrying from under the bed startles Norah, and she bumps into the dresser behind her, knocking over the candles. Worried the animal might be a family pet, she runs out of the house and retrieves the kitten from underneath the van. Seconds later, Norah sees smoke coming out of the bedroom window, and she realizes what just happened. The woman tries to extinguish the flames, but none of her methods work, and the fire quickly spreads to the rest of the house. That evening, Rose finally arrives at the house, and to her horror, she sees fire trucks surrounding the burning abode. Panicked and confused, the woman runs to the van and asks her sister for an explanation. The remorseful Norah says it was an accident, but the irate Rose demands that she take accountability for her negligent actions. Later, the mother heads to the janitorial supply store to pick up Oscar, and she tells Winston that her sister ruined everything by burning down a client's house. Days later, the woman tells her father that she's going back to being a housekeeper, especially since they need to pay off the $40,000 debt from burning down the house. Joe points out that she won't be able to pay it off by working as a maid, so he promises to think of a way to help the family. That evening, Norah finally comes clean and tells Lynn that she wanted to meet her in case she didn't know her mother had passed. Instead of expressing gratitude, the woman takes offense to her meddling ways, especially since she had a horrible relationship with her mother who was an alcoholic. Lynn adds that she feels embarrassed because she thought that Norah was interested in her romantically. The apologetic Norah tries to explain her side, but the furious woman storms out of the diner. At Oscar's birthday party, Norah finally apologizes to her sister, and Rose also acknowledges that she should have been at the client's house and not at the baby shower trying to impress people whose opinions shouldn't matter to her. The older sibling admits that she'll always worry about the woman because she's had to take care of her since their mother died. So, Norah states that she doesn't need looking after anymore because she needs to learn how to be independent without the safety net of her family. After the reconciliation, the sisters return to the table and enjoy the rest of Oscar's birthday celebration. Days later, Joe surprises Rose by revealing that he sold his house to finance a new family-owned cleanup business, and he wants the daughter as his managing partner, an offer she gladly accepts. Meanwhile, Norah embarks on a road trip to explore her independence and face the uncertainties of the future head-on.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.